Hello everybody, welcome to episode 14 of the Livestream Rebels with me, Dan. No, not me, Dan. I'm not Dan, I'm Mark. He's Dan. That threw me. Yeah, don't know what planet I'm on today. We have a slight issue, I have noticed. We are using some different software and I've just noticed that it won't allow me to go live on my LinkedIn profile. So I'm going to have to think of other ways of being able to do that. So welcome to everybody on Dan's profile and people on YouTube for a change. So we've shuffled my LinkedIn profile for YouTube, the DW Media YouTube channel. So how are you, Dan? How are you doing now that I've got your name right?
I'm all right. I'm Mark. Good to see you. No, I'm good. Yeah, it's been a busy few weeks, hasn't it? Really.
It has been a fairly busy few weeks, not necessarily with live streaming, but certainly with video production and some other stuff. Testing of some equipment, as we inevitably end up doing pretty much every week, of some description, testing something, pushing the boundaries, pushing things forward. So pushing the boundaries with Livestream Rebels or Livestream Rebels this week. Trying to use some additional software to allow us to go live on some additional channels, but then do it from one central resource, if that makes sense. So today we are using a piece of software called Livetsream, which is a multicasting aggregation style software that allows you to send one stream from your video processing codec or software mixer, whatever you want to call it, across to a centralized platform that then distributes or multicasts your stream to various different platforms if that's what you want to do. And we have obviously pushed it to the limit and found that there are some restrictions in what we want to do with it. So I might have to have a rethink on how we do that in the future. Because as I say, we normally go live on both my LinkedIn personal profile and Dan's LinkedIn personal profile. But this wouldn't allow us to do that today. And I didn't have time because I didn't discover this until we literally pressed the go live button and it kicked me out of my LinkedIn profile. So this is how you find out these things. You test them till they break and you find out ways to circumnavigate that sometimes. Not always, but quite often you can find a workaround that will allow you to do that. So the question is, what are we talking about today? Well, if you've seen what I've put in the description, we are talking about remote live productions. So what does that actually mean? Well, we, or should I say I, because Dan doesn't have a tendency to kind of do these things, but I have what we call remote live produced shows for people, or remote produced live shows for people. Bit of a tongue twister. So that means that I actually host and run productions and do all the switching on behalf of my clients. And this is something I've done for quite some time, actually. And then just recently, with one of my clients who we're going to feature a little bit later on, did a live podcast production and recording, which was something that I've kind of dabbled in before, but not with quite as many guests. So I say as many guests, as many people on the actual live show, but it went extremely well. Everything was flawless. The feedback I got from the client was really, really good, which is massively positive and great to hear. And it's probably something that we're going to continue to do in the future as well, because he ultimately has tended in the past with another provider to have done these once a month. So we are looking to perhaps do these on a fairly regular basis. So what is a remote live production? I'll kind of caveat by saying that there are lots of tools out there that allow you to do these things. There are web platforms that will allow you to sign into, connect your production, build your production within their actual workflow, and then invite your guests with a very simple, easy one-click web browser link that you send to your guest, and then they can join your live production or your show or your recording, because sometimes you can just do a recording without it being live, and everybody sees each other and can interact in real time. As I say, there are a plethora of these platforms available, and I certainly have seen them jump forward in leaps and bounds in their functionality, but also in their capability of being able to structure a show to your liking, as in aesthetically, to put the show together in a way that you like it. Now, in my experience, and I think I've probably tried just about every single one. There's maybe one or two that smaller sites that I haven't used, that I haven't had the opportunity to test. They're all much of a muchness. One or two might have some additional functionality that the others don't, but they all pretty much work in the same way. But for me, there are some slight limitations with these particular web platforms, and it's just that you don't get the customization that I would necessarily want to have for some of the stuff that I do. And that's just because I want to kind of push things a little bit further and create the best possible production that I can with as much control over it as I can, which you'll see from the way that we do Livestream Rebels. We can customize this in any way that we pretty much want and get it to look exactly how we want. So any questions on any of that, Dan? Anything you kind of want to add?
No, I'm just moving my whole desk around as we do it, so I apologise if I've been like fidgeting. I realised that when we went live, everything was in the wrong place. But yeah, and I mean, I've seen you do these live, things with Livestream Rebels before, and it's so nice having that flexibility from a standpoint of not knowing what you're doing on your end. I know very little about vMix, and just being able to say, Mark, can we do this? And you go, yeah, that's fine, we can do it. And not going, oh, you see, the software isn't, we need to go to a new pricing structure and we just need to go there and we need to use this other software. It's nice to have everything all in one and just have it all from one provider. And you being able to do that with one console right in front of you is just, is really good for people on the other end of it. And it makes life a lot easier. And even dialing into these shows, it's just one link, it's one password. That's
I think in the past we've kind of covered both of our setups and how we actually have our desk set up, our studio set up. But what we probably didn't cover was how you're actually joining the call, how you're actually joining me live when we're in completely separate locations. Admittedly, we're only about 5 miles away from each other, but we could literally be, in different continents. There might be a slight delay in kind of how we communicate, depending on some of the infrastructure. But more importantly, it's about the upload speed of your internet connection that is always going to create some delay in the conversation. And you quite often see these types of things when you see a TV broadcast that is ingesting a live feed from a reporter in the field, which is something that we have actually done. We did that using a very similar system, slightly different protocol to what Dan is currently coming into this call on. But you do inevitably end up with a slight delay, which is kind of the trade-off between getting a really good quality video and audio feed in, as opposed to it being in real time. And when I say there's a delay, it might literally be half a second, but you can see when I might have said something to Dan and his response is slightly delayed, but half a second is pretty much nothing. So it's certainly usable. That's for sure. But on this particular occasion, I'm using a it's a separate tool that the software developers of this software that I use, which is called vMix, as Dan mentioned earlier on, and they introduced something called vMix Call, which basically is a separate system that allows you to connect a remote caller into the main system. I have the facility to be able to bring 4 guests in, so we could actually have 5 people on an actual live stream or a recording, all talking at the same, well, not at the same time, but all talking together as part of a panel, if that's the kind of thing that you wanted to do. And vMix Call is really good in the respect that I can actually send a completely separate feed back to Dan. So what he sees is a very, very different view to what everybody else sees, and even what I see. Although I can control what I see in that respect as well. So it's really easy to use system, and I've never really had any issues with anybody not being able to do it. Especially now that we have a bit more control over what the guests can bring in, so they could actually just come in and share a presentation and still be able to speak. Now, depending on what their upload and download speeds were, I can actually adjust what Dan is fed back. So if his internet connection wasn't great, then I could actually reduce what is going out to him. He's still coming in at a good rate, a good quality, but what's being sent back could be slightly reduced if he didn't have enough bandwidth to be able to accept a good quality feedback to him. So, and from your point of view, Dan, it all works pretty seamlessly and it's easy to use.
I was just trying to chat there just to make it look like I was, just doing that delay response. No, I won't do that. Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's never once failed me whenever I've been using it with you. You just literally click. The only thing I've ever done is I've done it incorrectly once, where I decided that I'd be a smart person. Can we swear on the show?
Smart ass.
That's what you're going to be smart ass. Yeah. You said it. It's fine now. And I was going to try and because the screen I can see is Mark and then me, and then another smaller version of basically the live output, the program out, all logoed up, all branded up, so I can see what's going out to you watching. And then I can also see the current time and also the countdown, because we try and keep it to half an hour. We do go over every so often, or we do shorter sometimes, normally over. Mark talks a lot. And then, and I just witter. And then, yeah, so I can see all that. And it's never once failed me, other than the time that I tried to log in on 2 devices because I thought, I know what I'll do, and then just didn't think about it logically at all. So it's only ever gone wrong when I've done something wrong. And
so that was sorry, that just to interject there. That was two devices on the same link. You could have had 2 devices on 2 separate links, which would have worked. But yes,
but I didn't ask for that. I just sort of did it and thought this might work, and didn't even ask Mark. So that yeah, but yeah, never any issues. And it is just as simple as joining a Teams meeting, or well, maybe not joining a Teams meeting because Teams is a bit, but as easy as joining as a Google Meet meeting or a Zoom meeting. You just go in, your camera's already on, everything like that. You just give permission to it. It's in your browser. We've used it on the phones as well for a few events we've done. And even that's been absolutely rock solid. There's been no issues with it at all. It's just absolutely it's an amazing system. And to have the controls your end as well of sharing your screen and all this sort of stuff, and then that just brings it into you, and you can just manage it. All we have to do is throw your stuff, and it works, which is just an amazing system all around.
What will be interesting is to see when they bring out the next version of the actual software, they are going to introduce the ability to directly connect to Zoom calls as well. So that'll be interesting to kind of see how that pans out now. Obviously, from the perspective of using Zoom as a communication tool, you really need to be on one of the higher tier levels to get the 1080 version coming in. But it will be interesting to kind of see how it works with some of the other versions. We will test that when we get the opportunity to do that. It hasn't been released yet. It is in beta, and I'm not really prepared to stick my neck on the line and actually try and use the beta version in a live production, because you just inevitably know that that's when you're going to find the bug that they've missed. So I'll definitely wait for the full-blown version to come out, which hopefully will be in the next 2 or 3 months. So looking forward to that, just as some additional options in the kind of stuff that we can kind of push the boundaries with a bit in the future. So I talked a little bit earlier on about some of the live producing that I've done, and a friend of the show's. And if you've ever seen Dan and I in association with Making Sang, we have actually done some collaboration in the past under the name The Trio of Loons, which kind of fits our personalities really well. And I used to produce Making's live show. So I was the guy behind it, pressing the buttons and making sure that everything was appearing when it should. But we were using one of these web-based systems, these browser-based systems that I was talking about earlier on. So what I'll do is I'll cut across to actually give you an idea of kind of what that looked like. And I'm going to do this in a slightly different way to begin with. So first of all, we used something called StreamYard, which I think a lot of people may be familiar with. Now, the gory pink, unfortunately, is part of Making's branding, and I'm not dissing it. It's, that's just kind of the way that she came about with her branding. So it is a little bit overkill for my liking, but hey ho, that's the way she did it. And this works in a quite a similar way with regards to bringing guests in. So you connect basically through a web link, and it just connects to your camera and your audio. If you have a separate audio device, you can choose how you actually come in. Now, the thing I was talking about before was that the actual aesthetics of this and how you can set your actual productions up, for me, is a little bit lacking. And certainly when you saw me switch from my scene before to the scene that we are now with Dan and I on either side of the slides, that is quite a nice feature, and I can have quite a lot of control over how that appears and looks. But with something like a lot of these browser-based platforms, you have very little control over how you can do what we call transitions or layouts as well. They're quite limited in what they can actually do because obviously it's working in your browser and the functionality just isn't there currently. There are a couple that maybe have pushed the boundaries a little bit more, but still, in my opinion, just lacking in features that I would really want to use to produce a show. But you can obviously set up different options. And one of the one that Making uses, which I will probably need to change how I'm displaying this, is a 2-shot with a presentation. So I'm just going to move across so that we can actually see it a little bit better because it's cutting off on the side there. So that's my transition that you've just seen there, which I think is quite effective. And it's a very similar kind of shot or scene to what you're actually looking at from Making Show, the former Creator Show. So you can see the two guests are on the left-hand side, and then the presentation is on the right-hand side. Now, what you can't do with a lot of these things is easily switch between the actual slides. You can to a point, but you can't do it in a particularly effective transitional way, which I can ultimately do with mine. So again, functionality is a little bit lacking. This is all based on StreamYard, which again, for somebody first starting out who wants to do these kind of presentations, who wants to do interviews or podcasts, it's a great option for people. It really is. It's relatively inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. And it means that you don't necessarily need a particularly powerful computer because, again, it's running in your browser. The thing to bear in mind is you need a good camera, you need a good audio source, so you need a good mic or a good camera with good mic on your camera or way of connecting the two. You can literally just use a webcam. You can connect a phone if you wanted to do it that way as well, which will up your production rather than a webcam, or certainly a laptop webcam. But your internet speed is the critical element for that as well, because you still need to be able to send this up to the actual platform itself. So you need a good connection. With the system that I use with vMix, we do need fairly powerful computers to be able to encode, which is the bit that takes the camera feed and then is able to push it up to the internet. So push it into the software and up to the actual internet. So there's quite a bit of complexity coming with the systems that I use as opposed to these browser-based systems, these web systems. And that is why I would always say if you're first starting out and you want to do this kind of thing, is to look at some of these browser-based ones because they are so easy to use, very user-friendly. And it gets you started because ultimately, the barrier to a lot of people is just getting started. So if you've got a system that works fairly intuitively and is pretty easy to use, then certainly do that. Now, one of the big benefits, I would say, over the browser-based systems is that they more often than not allow you to multicast, which means what I was talking about earlier on, is being able to push it out to different platforms. Depending on what subscription tier that you are subscribed to, you will be able to have a number of different platforms that you can go live to. So you could go live to LinkedIn, if you've got the facility on LinkedIn, X, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and you could push a feed or push a live show out to all of those platforms simultaneously. Now, if you tried to do that from just a normal computer, then you would need to have 4 times the bandwidth to be able to do that. So you would need to be sending 4 signals up. So say, for instance, you were sending out 1080p stream and you were sending it out at, say, 6 megabits per second, then obviously you would need at least 30, between 24 and 30 to be able to send to 4 platforms. Whereas using one of the browser-based systems, you would just be sending 1 feed up. So it isn't as important. Now that is where I talked about the start of the show using Restream allows me to do something similar. So I'm sending 1 signal to Restream, and then Restream, which is the browser system, is then sending it out, multicasting to the other platforms. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And I've explained it in a way that people can actually understand. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier on as well was that about this client of mine who I'm now hopefully moving into doing a live podcast episode with. And he has in the past used a company that were live stream events or big in the live stream event space. And that relationship is kind of not moving forward anymore. So Richard came to me and said, could I undertake doing something very, very similar? And because I already do the majority of Richard's videos, then obviously for me it was I've wanted to do this for a long time. So we hosted and produced the first live show last week, I think it was. So just to give you an indication of kind of how it looked, I've got a couple of slides here. And this was using my software to bring in multiple guests. So I'll just switch across to that, and you'll see here how the 3 guests, because ultimately I wasn't a guest, I wasn't appearing, but I had to be part of the show to be able to interact with everybody at the start before we went live. So almost like a green room, as you would refer to it, so that we could have a conversation. We could just make sure that everybody was comfortable with what was actually happening with a runner show. Not that there was a runner show with this one. It was a very loose kind of run of show idea, because it was ultimately a Q&A podcast session. But so that I could explain to everybody how best to have themselves positioned on their feedback, because they were ultimately using vMix calls. So we had 3 vMix calls coming in for Richard, Joe, and Dre, and then myself, who was not coming in on a call, but just coming in on a camera feed like I normally do. But they could see me all the time. We had a production clock so that we knew where we were time wise, so that we weren't overrunning massively, so everybody could see how much time was being spent on the actual podcast itself. And it worked absolutely seamlessly. Everybody could hear each other. There was no delay in the feeds to each other. So yeah, feedback was really good from everybody, and they found it extremely easy to negotiate and navigate the actual call itself. And then the other view that we had for each individual person was a single actual camera feed. So if a question had been asked by the host, who was Richard, I would then cut across to the interviewee who was answering that. And initially, I also had a lower third appearing, just so that people had more of an insight into kind of how to connect with these people as well. So you'll see that from this lower third that there was some additional information, so an email address and also their LinkedIn profile, where they could connect with the actual guest that was appearing on the show. So that was pretty much it for this. It was a fairly straightforward one. And some of the feedback, not the feedback, but some of the discussions that I had after the fact were that we didn't on this occasion bring in people's questions from the platforms that we were going live to, because we were going live to 4 platforms. So we were using Twitter, X, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And people were asking questions on the various different platforms. And what we had was another member of the team who was monitoring those platforms. And any questions that were asked or any feedback, they were then copying that across into a Google Doc from the actual chat element of the platform. And then Richard, the host, was able to then obviously see that Google Doc and ask the questions to the guest. And one of the things that we talked about in kind of post feedback was that we would then be able to bring those questions in and have them appear on the screen on the live actual production as it was going out. So that is going to be something that we'll probably bring in for the next show. And it's a fairly easy thing to do, but it means that whoever's controlling it can decide which questions actually appear live on the screen. It doesn't have to necessarily be me. I set up the facility in the background so that they can literally just push a button and select which question actually appears, and then obviously they can then interact with the guests who are on the show and answer the questions if it's been something that's predominantly levied at that particular person. So, any questions on any of that, Dan? Everything makes sense? I explained it all okay?
I think it does, yeah. Absolutely. It's great to see. I mean, I didn't tune in for that. I was going to, because you did tell us about it about 2 weeks beforehand. And I had it in my head to tune in, but then I just didn't. But I mean, that's the first time I've seen those images, and it just looks absolutely great. And I think as well, what's worth mentioning is seeing what people have as their home studio, rather than just having a webcam pointing at a random background. You know, it's so much nicer to see something with a background in it and seeing a bit of light there and stuff, and seeing a bit of set design going on with them. And I think then with the branding and the graphics in there, just looked really good and finished the whole thing off. And it looks really, really, really good. And the quality of it looks really good as well. You see some live shows that are done with people's webcams and stuff, and the quality's not that good. But I think having a good camera there, or having something, I mean, even Mac now, Mac, they have a way of using I say Mac, I'm using a Mac right now behind this laptop. But they have a way of using your iPhone as a camera now, rather than just using, so it links in wirelessly, rather than using the camera internally, which says something about what they've put the camera internally as. I mean, they've added a feature to use your own phone externally. So yeah. But I think that shows sort of how important video conferencing is now, and how important having someone to help you up your production is, just to help with that and assist with that. And from a production standpoint, I mean, we go into places every month. We go into places that want to do some form of live streaming or some form of AV tech, and we go in and they say, we want to do this. We have no clue how we're going to do that. And then there's about 30 other things they probably haven't thought about that comes along with that. And even, to the point where they might phone up a day before and say, oh, we've just realized we need this. And having someone there who can assist with that and guide you through that process is absolutely key. And I think if they're wanting to do live streaming and they're wanting to up their game, going down this route is an absolutely fantastic option.
Definitely. And I think one of the things that I say to everybody on a lot of occasions when I have conversations about this stuff is there is a lot of noise on social media. There's a lot of noise online. And when I say noise, I mean there's a lot of messages. There's a lot of people, vying for your attention, trying to get your attention. And if you can do some simple little things that will elevate your live stream or your social media that mean that you can engage with your prospects, your customers, your clients in a more effective way, but something that stands out over and above what everybody else is doing, please don't be a sheep and just follow the path, the well-trodden path that everybody else has done. Try and push the boundaries and make something that is aesthetically pleasing, that really stands out in somebody's news feed. And that they are more inclined to watch because it looks good. But without detracting from the message, because obviously your message still needs to be pretty good. And hopefully we've managed to get a reasonable message across without waffling too much today. But if anybody does have any questions on any of the stuff that we've covered today, what other platforms are out there, how they would integrate these platforms into their workflows, how they can even introduce live streaming into, their marketing mix, then by all means, ask some questions, pop them in the comments below this video that you're watching. Feel free to reach out to Dan and I via the website. We can assist you in the best way possible if you want to get in touch. But yeah, please ask some questions so that we can make sure that if there's something that we've missed, that we can address it. I think that's going to be pretty much it for today. I've tried to kind of stick to about 30 minutes, which is a first. But hopefully it's been insightful, and hopefully somebody's learned something along the way. But always happy to dive in more and explain things in more in depth if anybody wants that. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for this episode. I think we are planning to do one more episode before Christmas. Still need to plan on exactly what we're going to cover in that episode, but we will look forward to seeing you then. So hopefully everybody has a great rest of their Wednesday and a great rest of this week, or the best week, whatever, however you want to describe it. Not sure what the hell I'm trying to say, but apart from, I think we're better say bye and see everybody shortly. Don't you dare say it, Daniel. I will send the big boys round to kill you if you say it.
I'll stream you later.
Oh, he's done it. He's done it. Failed miserably. Right. Bye for now, everyone.